Webinars are hot. As a content marketing professional, I've produced hundreds of videos for social and traditional media platforms and currently work with one of the largest podcast networks in the country. So for me, understanding how webinars work in the B2B space is both essential to my professional development and an exciting form of content creation. According to a study commissioned by digital agency Demandwave, 41% of B2B marketers cite webinars as the best marketing tactic for driving revenue. I've set out to discuss webinars with one of the foremost experts in the field, Matt Lay, president of the Streaming Network in Toronto. Together, we've created this multi-part series of videos and podcasts, the webinar Lessons from the Front Line, or How I Learned to Live with Never Getting a Second Chance with Live Virtual Events. Welcome back to part 2 of our discussion around taking content and repurposing it. This is LFTF, Lessons from the Front Line. With me again is Matthew Lay, president of the Streaming Network. Welcome again.
Thanks for having me, Pete. So you've kept the fire burning.
Kept the fire burning. It's getting warmer and warmer by the minute. I have no idea whether it's actually the fire or just my, I'm getting some hot flashes.
I was watching the last one from the. I think it must have been a little bit warmer than it is today, and I was seeing that by the end we had a little bit of sweat going.
Yeah.
We worked up, we worked up a little bit of a sweat.
Some vigorous conversation.
Vigorous.
Yeah. I don't know. You can't see this side of my face, but it's completely red. So we sort of finished off talking about what works well in terms of topics and formats when you're repurposing content. We had a really great conversation in terms of using webinars. We talked about the ROI webinar, and you broke that down for us. One of the things I found interesting as we left that off, and you mentioned that one of the pieces of content, one of the assets that came out of that was a report card,
right?
The webinar report card, and I found it interesting because that in and of itself is not. I mean, it is a piece of content, but it becomes a leads generation tool as well. All content is sort of a leads generation tool, but this is very much the sort of thing that you put on landing pages that you can actually drive leads and people come and sign in and give you their email addresses. So I'd like to talk a little bit about that, like what other types of content you can generate from this raw content, and sort of dig in a little bit about how that works, I guess, within the purchase funnel.
Yeah. So I'm not going to start with the report card since it was last.
Yeah.
But you are right. I mean, in that all of these can generate leads to a certain extent, but the different types of content are used for different people and at different points in the funnel, if you will. So what we know about people is different people like to consume content differently. So even within the realm of video, is that if you've got an executive who needs to have buy-in on a project, there's not a likelihood they're gonna sit there and watch 20 minutes or 40 minutes of us talking about repurposing content. They may, if they're an executive that comes from the marketing side and they're interested in our discussion, or they like the cut of your jib, but generally speaking, they're not going to. They're gonna watch a segment that we put out, a short segment, probably that 30-second to 2-minute buzzworthy piece that will go out on social that will lead him to us and say, hey, this is something that I want to investigate. And then you've got sort of the department head, manager level, and in video, they usually say that they're gonna watch about a 5-minute video. They wanna get enough meat on the bones that they recognize as a company that they should be talking to or looking at more, but they'll likely pass that on to somebody else. And that's where things like webinars and long format content come in, podcast webinars and the like. Is that somebody who's really digging in and trying to learn something? So anyone who spends 40 minutes with us or whatever this, the total of the repurposing comes in, is somebody trying to learn how to repurpose content in general. So we always format our video and have for some time in such a way that we can at minimum get that long webinar piece and the 4 to 5 minute clip piece, because we find that's where most of our buyers are at. But there are those people who like to read as well. Mm-hmm. I mean, at minimum, transcribe what you do and put it online. It's great for SEO, but it also is good for those people who like to read. It makes it easier if you're using ghostwriters and the like, or your marketer is writing content for you, to take what you've said and turn it into something that can be read or is easily read.
And it can just be literally that, you send it out to transcription,
yeah.
you come back, you
You know what? Yeah, you can do. I think
it can be that.
It can be that
It can
because
be a little more
there's value in
nuanced.
that. But I think that if you are going to do a blog, that people read differently than we talk, and that you should polish it, maybe add some more stats or some imagery to it.
Write it as an article, what we talked about as an actual article.
Yeah, like what you took away from it more than anything else. But there is value in both, right? And why miss any of these opportunities in this day and age? And so. Usually the videos of any sort, the short or the long format, are ungated content. Blogs are ungated. It's all awareness. Even the podcast, I mean, it's ungated, right? It's awareness. It's a found audience. It's out there for people just to investigate. But then when you go down a little bit into things like the ebook, and generally speaking, long format video like webinars, it's gated. So the ebook can be lightly gated. Ours always are. It's just an email address. We're not, going to call you if you download one of our ebooks, so don't worry about that. But you're going to go into a webinar, a full-fledged webinar with resources and everything that we do. It's going to be a full gate. Someone's taken that step is someone who we think is showing some level of buyer intent, especially if they stick around and watch the full webinar, which is what's great about the data and analytics from videos and webinars, is that you know how long someone spent with your content. You don't know about that with ebooks and stuff like that. They might have downloaded it and who knows what they did with it. But the last part about this is the report card. So along with our inbound strategy and our overall content strategy being fueled by this, each of these tools can be used by sales from a sales enablement perspective. And that's, watch this video if you want to learn more about this, or listen to our president talk about engagement, and we're going to go through that in the meeting, or this is something that you might learn if you take this meeting, whatever it might be. They're all things that can help fuel the sales and the chase process. But the report card is an evolution of all of this. It's a truly high value form. And what I mean by that is sales can send it out, it sits on our website, and if you fill that out, I don't only know who you are, I know how many webinars you're running, if you're good at promoting your webinars, if your conversions are up to snuff, if you're utilizing your on-demand effectively, if you're making use of all the tools that are available, even what you think about your own program or what people tell you. These are some of the questions that we ask. And the payback that we give you are strategies to improve that. But now in our CRM, we know everything we need to know about your webinar program. That if you fill out the form, we know right away if you're an A target or not. We don't know if we would call you an MQL. We would say you're marketing qualified because you took that step and that time with us. But we know what kind of target you are because we know your data sets. We know if you fit in well. And so that high value form is something that I've seen used, and I continue to use it, link it to every single webinar that I do. Put it out everywhere I can, because if someone's going to take that time, it is always good for us. But this was it came out in the HubSpot case study. So HubSpot had a webinar program, which was talked about in the ROI presentation. But HubSpot had a webinar program where they would bring in experts, and they would take a website that was submitted, and they would put it up on a screen, and they would talk about all the good and all the bad things it was doing from an inbound perspective. So they would carve it up, make fun of it. At the end of the 10 minutes, they would get a ping pong ball thrown at them, and then they would move on to the next website.
Right.
So it was based around this website assessment, and people got to learn while they watched. It was a great idea, but even better than that is they had their own report card tool. It was a high-value form that said, we know that you weren't brave enough to submit your website. You watched other people's. But if you want us to do an assessment for you in the comfort of just a one-on-one, that's a lot easier for you, then fill this out and we'll do it for you. That was them booking a meeting with a sales rep, basically, to take them through all the things they were doing wrong and why they needed HubSpot.
Right.
Everyone who filled out that form was considered an MQL or an SQL, and they sent them the form on the front end of it. After they registered, they said, oh, you didn't submit. Submit now. We'll do it one-on-one. Thanks for attending. Submit now. And they just pummeled and kept it on the webinar as well. So the beauty of that form is that the person got something that they knew was good. An assessment. The beauty of our form was that it automatically, instantaneously gave them advice for improving their webinar. But in both cases, it gave us the information that we need to try and pitch our services to them.
And all from this one
All from this one
central
thing,
piece of content.
And you know what? It's funny about that too, and this is a caution. I was on an interactive panel at a conference not too long ago because they don't know where to put webinar people because we're weird and we're just like off in this little corner. And so they put me on an interactive panel, and it was about things like this. And you know, people were talking about what they did, and everyone in the audience was saying how they wanted to do interactive. Like they wanted to do this stuff, and they heard the stories. I even talked about this on that panel, even though it wasn't what I was supposed to be there for. And everyone was struggling with it. Mm-hmm. And I think that things like this are hard to force. Because after we did this and we loved it so much, we're like, yeah, we want to do another one. Let's do one about hybrid events, or let's do one about collaboration tools, another business that we're in. And you know, I think I spent 2 months theorizing. I just didn't have it, right? Because it was not organic, right? And so in that case, I would say this is an outlier. I don't know that you can plan this. Maybe you can. Maybe there's smarter people than me to plan it all the way to get here. But this is just somebody who needs the information fed to them.
Right. So, but then, I mean, what kind of content are you looking for? So you recognize that it wasn't the right kind of content, implying that when you see it, you'll know it.
Yeah.
What are you looking for? Like, what is? Let's say I'm trying to come up with one of these. You know, we've got all these different things we're creating. I want to create one of these things. What are the signposts for this thing? What should sort of the first things that you dig into be?
Well, I think that if you've done a study of any sort, you can do the maturity assessment, benchmark, index, or report card, like we call it. That's an easy one. So if there's good data out there that you, especially if you own the data, and you're slicing and dicing said data, and you're offering like in this case, this is for people who have programs. It is not for people who don't. And that is a good place for you to be able to visualize your data and customize it and personalize it, which we're going to be talking about, I think, on the next podcast, to that person and to their experience. So I think that's good stuff. If you've taken the time, and often it's done with research houses, and you've spent the money with a Forrester's or Demand Metric or whoever it might be in your industry to create something that is of high value. So, you know, you've gone out and they've either done a big survey of the market for you, or you've taken a bunch of the knowledge that you or your company has and you turned it into like our webinar survival guide, right? That's not us writing that. That's researchers writing that, but basically asking us and looking at our data and finding out what works and what doesn't, and turning it into these toolkits that we can give to people who are the analytical types trying to run webinars. So you've got that sort of unique thing that you can now find ways of disseminating to people in a way that is personal to them, where they're at in their webinar journey, not their buyer's journey, but where they're at. They're looking to expand, they're looking to ramp up on demand, they're looking to do whatever, and you've got tools or data. That's a good one, I think, to go into sort of the interactive forum.
Right. Okay.
I think.
So let's say that I'm a head of marketing at let's say financial services business, maybe a law firm, but in this case, this is good advice because hopefully somebody from the financial services sector is watching this. These are our clients. These are the people we market to. So how does this work? Like, what if I run a financial services business and I want to create something like this? How am I approaching this? What would you tell me in terms of just getting started and starting to build this sort of thing?
So that is a good example, because a lot of the older industries, financial services being one, legal, accounting, a lot of the professional services, I guess I would say, one of their big struggles is the creation of content. I think we all face it, but I think that they face it more, and that's partially because of just the world they live in, right? They're used to being the smartest guys in the room. They want to maintain that. It's hard to get people who their thought leaders are all billable hours guys and girls, so getting them off of billing hours to doing something like this is really, really hard. So they are a good one. So where I would start with them is if, and they don't usually know, because a lot of times their content is reactive to what's going on in the world, but if they have an overarching message for the year, that's a good thing. So we're going to do this. We're going to talk about this. If they're launching a new practice group, if they're moving into a new space, if they're changing the way they do business, And there's a reason for that. They've researched.
Marijuana is about to become legal. There's all these publicly traded companies, that sort of thing.
Yeah,
We're going to make a push.
Exactly.
Right.
So what the average law firm will do, let's call, or financial services is bad.
Financial
so it goes, but I don't know if financial services would be involved in this, but
Okay.
a law firm,
Okay.
the average law firm will do is that legislation will come out and they will comment on it. They will comment on it for their customers because a lot of what they do with their marketing and their content is value add to their customers who or clients, I guess they call them, who don't want to talk to their lawyer about it one-on-one because you're going to charge them. They want to give them a lot of this stuff. So something will happen and they'll go out and they'll produce a webinar, a video, a white paper, a guide, whatever on it. But if they're a law firm that says, you know what, we've decided we've got this many marijuana manufacturers already, we want to corner the market the way that MNP has tried to do in the accounting space, then this would make sense to create an overarching, what's going to happen in the next 12 months, what you need to watch out for if you're a producer, if you're a this, or if you're a that, and create a piece of content that really circles the overall market.
Cannabis playbook.
Cannabis playbook, right?
Something general enough. That
General enough,
put
but
forward. Yeah.
hopefully insightful enough if you're going to try and corner the market on it.
Yeah.
And then those pieces, highly produced pieces, can be turned into something that, because it's not like most people are getting into that space now, but there will be people getting into it next week, next month, and 6 months from now, next year, and the year after, depending on how well or not well it does. I'm assuming it's going to do very well. And so these pieces of content can continuously, just like we've done, be embedded in, and although we've added to this, these pieces of content continue being used.
Right.
When we go to financial services, the interesting part there, because we spend a lot of time talking about it on this podcast as well as out in the market, is that there is a lot of evergreen content that they produce, a lot. Whether it be practice management for advisors or investing basics for you and me, or what, there's a lot that they do produce. And so for them, depending on where they are in that cycle, this is great for that evergreen stuff. Is come in, produce it really, really well, and have a plan for how you're going to continue to reuse it. Because I often go in and speak to these people. We bump into them all the time. And we say, oh, have you seen my podcast? Yeah, it's really great. We're thinking about doing podcasts. And we talk to this other company, and we got a video company, and we got a webinar company, and we got this. And then the same guy's doing the same thing 17 times.
Right.
I remember one day I was in a meeting with RBC, early days, and it was their chief investment officer? No, economic officer was in the room. He was going to do the presentation. The presentation was just basically his economic update. Really well attended. But this is a guy, he's the chief economist of the RBC. At the time, every time, still today, before the federal government launches a budget, they ask his opinion. They want to make sure he's not going to balk at things they're doing.
Right.
This is the guy that the week before, he was saying it over lunch, the week before was sitting at lunch with the prime minister arguing about something that he doesn't agree with, about what they're going to do with interest rates or whatnot. And he's sitting there talking about it. I'm like, so is this presentation, it's got to be pretty fresh, pretty new. He's like, Matt, all I do is give this presentation. That's all I do. I'm giving it here, and I don't know where I'm giving it tomorrow. They book me everywhere. I give this presentation nonstop, and then next corner I'll do a new one, I get the data, and I give this presentation again. I'm like, well, that's not very efficient. He's like, you'd think if my job was giving this presentation. Right. Well, that's one where you should probably do this instead of that.
Right.
So he could be in the studio or wherever it is, and he doesn't have to be in the studio. Like, he can do all kinds of stuff. Heck, do it at the CBC, and then have this waterfall of content continue to come out so that he's not giving that presentation every day. He's giving other insights and doing other things. And I'm assuming he's got a job too. I'm assuming his job really isn't giving that presentation. I doubt that it really is. So those are the type of things to look out for. Something that you're going to be talking about, or trying to be talking about, or you want people talking about, or the evergreen content. And then the last thing is what we've done is every business, whether you're a financial services firm, whether you're a software company, whatever it is, your front line is being asked the same questions over and over again. And the people delivering the answers are getting good at it, but they're not as good as somebody else in the company. Right? They're not as good as that guy or girl who is the expert in that space. That evergreen content, that content that answers those questions is great for this type of thing.
Okay, excellent. So we have a little over a minute.
Okay.
We have one more question.
Sure.
Let's see if we can race through it. It's tips and tricks. Give us some some things, short answer, long answer, tips and tricks within the repurposing of
All
content.
right, so Q&A always. So what we do here, what you watch on our stuff, makes it really easy to dissect content, ask a question, give an answer. Anecdotal, soundbite / distilling down answers into simple sentences, and then reiterating or building on that is very important. Catchphrases, yep, yeah. Catchphrases. Get your stories right and get them. Know where your stories fit. I have stories that are knee-jerk reactions. Someone says something, I tell a story. I've got my Cisco story, if you haven't heard, I'm sure I've told it, about their first virtual event. I've got my Gowlings and Walmart story about their webinar. Like, I've got these stories that are real, true-to-life examples that I use. And then I've got my anecdotes where I relate the real world to B2B and that sort of thing, and I go back on them all the time. And you want to get those right. And actually, we should link to it or however we do this, but we did a webinar with Ron Tite called The Art of Storytelling, where a lot of people feel like they don't have stories because they haven't gone out and done formal case studies, or they haven't been around for a very long time. And he gives 45 minutes of tips and tricks that's broken down into 5-minute segments on our YouTube site that talks to you about how we all have stories. There's stories everywhere to help tell your story, whether it's yours or he brought up the Blue Man Group and said, I don't know anything about the Blue Man Group. They have nothing to do with me. I use the Blue Man Group story all the time. I don't even remember that story, but he does use that all the time. And so you want to get good at telling your stories, because that is those are great hooks to bring people in, and they're things that people remember sort of about you. And then the final thing that I will say, and now I'm looking at a clock because it is there and we don't want to go over, is, and you know this, because although we had done the ROI thing and you came in and pitched us on this podcast and we had this plan, is you got to have the machine set up if it's going to be effective, right? You got to know where it goes after we leave here. So it goes in, starts getting post-produced. Where does it go to become the webinar? Where does it go to become the podcast? Who's going to start writing the blogs or whatever other thing you want to do? Who's doing that, and when does it need to be done? Because if not, you can produce a great piece of content like this, and it cannot do any of these things that you would love to do. So you got to build the machine, and it's not that hard. It could be, ours is like 3 or 4 people total, but you got to build the machine if you're going to do it, or know where on the assembly line does this go next, so that it can become useful.
Yeah. And I'll add to that, brevity is good, and there's no brevity, one of the tricks we do is after we finish these, we do quick hit answers. Yeah. We go through the entire list of questions quickly, Matt answers them, bang, 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 and those then become things we can post on social media. Yeah. They're nice and short, but you can also then from that throw potentially to a blog that you did. So it becomes a tool to drive to other things, right?
Yeah.
Each one of these things drives to something else.
And people might think, we got a luxury. We own a studio and we're down here, but some of our customers that come in and commit a day or usually a full day doing this kind of stuff is they shoot stuff they never use, right? That's the other thing too, is that there's an opportunity that you're going to try the stuff and it's not going to work. Yep. Maybe you're going to pull it out later and you're going to realize, oh, great, there was that great piece. We get that sometimes. Do you still have that footage from that point when Joe said this? That was 2 years ago, guys. But that kind of thing can come back. So,
Okay.
All right.
Good. LFTF. We are done. Matthew Lay, thank you so much.
Thanks. What are we talking about next?
Next, we are talking about the personalization of content.
All right.
Very, very interesting subject. Very modern, topical. Yes. Google's doing it. Facebook's doing it. How can you do it with webinars? So until next time, Matthew Lay, I'm Peter Vamus. That's the world of webinars as we see it. Thank you.